I had a couple of issues coming to me from different players. It was clear there was a dynamic thing going on between some of the most influential players and the coach. And I tried to play the middleman and like manage it all. Anyway, long story short, ended up getting to the point where the players got the coach fired. And this isn't an entirely unusual thing in pro sport. It wasn't ideal, obviously, because it actually ended up in the whole staff got cleaned out and I moved on as well. But I look back at that as like a big mistake that I made and have learned from. But I imagine sharing mistakes in both of your areas probably a little more catastrophic, by definition. Would you be willing to share one of your big mistakes each?
One of the sayings that we have is you can't fix what you can't talk about. And I will tell you that one of the challenges with vulnerability sometimes isn't that people aren't willing to be vulnerable, is that they're never been asked. And I'll give you an example. So I'm an instructor for the National Advanced Fire Research Institute, which is the governing body for all of the Type 1 incident managed teams that fight wildland fire all over the country and the world. So in order to become a Type 1 team, you have to get certified through this course. All instructors, there's a lot of instructors. I'm just one of a zillion, and I am a guest. I am not one of their cadre. And one day I have about 100 folks in the room, gray hairs and blue hairs, people that have been doing this work for a long time, probably 100 people in the room. And I'm getting ready to talk. And I had known that there had been some incidents where there'd been some recent fatalities in fire. So I just asked people, a little to your point, Patty, I asked people, hey, everybody who's actually been first on for a fatality, please raise your hands. And everyone raised their hands. And I almost started crying on stage because it was such an utter shock to me. And it was such an utter shock that they weren't talking to one another. And when they all looked around, they didn't realize that everyone else had been through a fatality because in their world, they didn't talk about it. And it was so, I had to take a minute and gather myself, my voice and everything else and restart. And I said, okay, we're going to have to talk about this. Like whatever I was going to talk about, we're going to talk about this. And it is, I guess what I would say, and I'm happy to tell you about 1 billion of my errors, but what I'm more focused in on is not the need to be vulnerable, but the need to be asked. And I think what I'm taking from your story, it's not a dodge. Like I said, I'm happy to tell you whatever you want, but it's more, the point I want to emphasize is not that people are sharing, it's that somebody asked. And yeah. I'll just pause there and let Holly jump in.
Well, I think before Holly jumps in, I think it's a great example. It's not necessarily that I did this and it led to X and here's who got hurt by it.
Yeah.
But I got goosebumps as you described that because it's an unexpected response for you and obviously a very powerful one.
Yeah.
But the reason I thought instead of saying, tell us what you did to make this happen, like I thought living it was better. To your point, it's about actually just having those conversations. If people are listening and they're like, how do I get my team to be more vulnerable? Well, you ask questions and they could be uncomfortable, but that's the whole point.
Yeah. I mean, one of the famous things I've learned, I've not been the first one, is people will ask me, well, how did you get them to tell you that? And I was like, I asked them. Like people will tell you the truth if you ask them, right? Most times they just never been asked.
Mm-hmm. Holly, over to you. Sorry to grab in the space before you got on.
But I mean, it gave me something to try to, cycle through the different stories. Like Preston said, this week or it's interesting, right? So I've been the chief flight director for three-ish years, going on 4. And before that, I was a flight director for many years. And it's interesting, right? Because you go through this process and maybe getting selected to the teams or any kind of team, Olympics, you get selected as a flight director and you kind of think you're pretty cool, right? I mean, everyone thinks you kind of think you're pretty cool.
You made it. Do you get like different stripes and a badge and like a better car park?
Absolutely. Yeah. You made it. And then, we talk about this with our new flight directors, then you start your training and you're kind of maybe a little humbled. Maybe I don't know everything, but then you get on console and mission control and you're like, I've got this. And that goes on for about a year. And then you sort of realize like all the stuff you have no idea, just the algorithms in your head and the way you approach problems. It sort of goes from like a 2D thing to a 3D thing. So I had been a flight director, several years, and I was responsible for a shuttle mission, and we did 5 spacewalks on this shuttle mission. We took up a piece of the space station that the Japanese team JAXA had built. And we were on the second spacewalk, and one of the spacesuits decided it didn't really want to work very well. And I would have told you going into that mission, I knew everything that I had studied, I had trained, I had followed my crew, I had been in the pool practicing the EVAs. I mean, you name it, I had done it. I was absolutely freaking prepared. And the spacesuit starts, not working real well. And you realize in that moment all of the questions that you should have asked, like the work you should have done. And luckily, cut the EVAs, the spacewalk, the EVA short, got the guys back inside. Everybody was fine. But it stands out to me as this uncomfortable moment where you realize you as the leader sort of just, one, that you got to rely on your team because you're never going to know everything. Two, how really, vulnerable you are in terms of, getting in your head that you've sort of figured this out, because the truth is you haven't. You have to constantly be learning, work and then do more work and then do more work and then keep doing work, right? And I picked that one out of the list just because it taught me a lot in a really uncomfortable situation, both, about teamwork, right? And toughness in a way, right? Because I had to, in that moment, rely on them. I had to, be frustrated at myself, but figure out how to get the guys back inside safely. So it's one of those moments that gave me a lot of good lessons learned and figured I'd share.